You're listening to a podcast from shortstoryradio.com.
Stormy Weather by JPerutz. The barely visible light coming through the snow-covered basement window shifted slightly. I checked my watch for the 8th time in an hour, 5:19 a.m. The static coming from the radio on top of the washing machine continued its steady hum without any indication of a potential feed. It had been 4 days since we came down here and 3 since the news broadcasts. Now there was nothing. We left the radio on anyway, clinging on to any shred of hope left. The following severe weather alert has been issued for the following counties: Essex, Suffolk, Norfolk, and Plymouth. Repeating, Essex, Suffolk, Norfolk, and Plymouth. The residents of these counties are highly urged to evacuate their homes and travel as far west as possible. Our meteorologists have confirmed that the storm will include temperatures as low as 45 degrees below zero, winds up to 130 miles per hour, and over 40 feet of snow, resulting in one of the most perilous blizzards ever seen in this country. The following areas have already been evacuated by the fire department: Quincy, Weymouth. This announcement looped over and over again on the little television in the communal kitchen. Mrs. Boyd, the owner of the townhouse we all lived in, had decided against evacuation, instead deciding to barricade herself in the basement. Joel Gibbs, the third-year surgical resident on the second floor, had decided to stay with Mrs. Boyd. According to him, the hospitals would be short-staffed and he wanted to be available to help, while secretly confiding to me later that he was just concerned leaving Mrs. Boyd alone in what promised to be a torrential storm. I didn't have anywhere else to go. The airports were shut down and the images on the news of overly crowded train stations did not seem promising. "Gaily, I'll go wherever you go," said Sammy Hines in his brusque tenor, eyes scanning the kitchen, hands unconsciously fiddling with the camera around his neck. That settled it. I didn't want 81-year-old Sammy traveling in these conditions, especially with his eyesight. Mrs. Boyd was thrilled that we were all staying. She began gathering the dry and perishable food and stacking it by the basement stairs. The rest of us began to mobilize, gathering all of the warm clothing and blankets we could find and bringing all of our supplies to the basement. We splayed the blankets near the water heater, which was due to stay warm for a few days. Mrs. Boyd sat cross-legged while I helped Sammy ease onto the floor. Joel went upstairs for the last time, shut the door, and locked it. That was 4 days ago. Joel sat on top of the dryer, knees huddled up to his chest. It had gotten unbelievably cold. Both Sammy and Mrs. Boyd were sleeping in down sleeping bags covered with wool blankets, both slightly snoring. I sat against the wall, checking my watch every 15 snores. We were fine on food. Mrs. Boyd amassed everything in her pantry and stocked it on the shelves next to the Bounce fabric softener and Gain detergent. Water, however, was running low. We assumed that at some point we'd be able to go upstairs and get tap water as needed. When we heard the booming storm evidently smash all of the glass windows from the first floor, we decided against leaving our haven. It probably wouldn't have mattered anyway. What little water we brought into the basement had frozen solid. "We can't stay," Joel whispered, eyes closed. I just stared at him. He was right. The winds had almost completely stopped. It would be logical to go outside and find the others who had decided to stay in Boston. But the lack of footsteps outside of the basement window scared me. During the first few hours of our barricade, we heard the usual bustling of Boston city life: pedestrians, cars, and sirens. It was deadly silent now. This had to mean something, but I didn't let my mind wander in that direction for fear it would come up with a daunting explanation. "I know, but Sammy, I'm worried he won't make it a mile in this chill," I whispered back intently. "We don't have to take Sammy. You and I could go check it out, then report back in a few hours. We can try finding running water." "But what if—" I didn't continue the thought because he nodded as soon as his own thought process finished my worry. What if we didn't make it back? Mrs. Boyd couldn't take care of Sammy by herself. She needed care as well, and without water there would be no hope for either of them. "Then I'll go. I'm going. I'm going right now. I'll find water and I'll be back in an hour," Joel said in a louder tone, rousing Mrs. Boyd from her sleep. "I really don't think that's a good idea," I tried saying, but it was futile. He was already walking up the stairs. "Please, you don't know what's out there."